Alright guys, let's get started in creating our application. First you want to head over to your browser. I'm going to open Chrome. So you want to head over to your browser and head over to firebase.google.com. This is where we'll be creating our database. We'll be using the real-time database, and you want to log into the account that you'll be using. So I'll be using my other account. I'm logged in, and now I can head over to the Firebase console. So now it gives us a message, welcome to Firebase, and we can create our Firebase project. So we'll be creating one called Players app. Okay, and you want to hit on continue and select the default account for Firebase, and you can create the project. So Firebase, it's really nice cloud service application or provider for creating things like hosting database. I really think it's great for the fact that it gives you a lot of things for free, things that you would have to pay when you're using AWS or Amazon or Azure or Microsoft. It's really amazing. All right, so our Firebase app is started. We can just head over to it, and we want to create our real-time database. We also have the option of creating a Firestore database. If you want to know how to work with Firestore database, you can check my previous video. In this video, we'll be using the real-time database. So we want to head over to the real-time database and click on create database. And you can choose your location. Location closest to me is Europe West. And you have two modes for creating the database. You have lock mode, which is in production mode, so that anyone can't have access to your data. The test mode can give access for like 30 days, and later you can change the rules if you want to. So we're gonna be using test mode, and that's going to take some time, and our database is set up. So the real-time database, unlike the Firestore database that creates the documents in collections and you have different documents in collection, the real-time database, it's a NoSQL database like the Firestore database, but it stores the value in key pair. So it's storing the data in a key pair value. So you have a key and you have the value for the data. So let me quickly make an example. So we have this URL here that gives us access to the database, and for creating a new one, you hit the plus sign and you can type what you want. So let's say players, and then you see it's a name value pair for the database. So our name is players, and the values will be what we will be storing in that players. So I can hit the plus button again, and then I can add whatever I want to store, but I need an ID to distinguish between the different data. So let's say the name of that ID is first data, because the ID here, unlike the relational databases that uses integers to show the ID, here we're using a string to show the ID. All right, so if you use an integer here, it's going to try to read it as an array. So this is a key value pair, it's an object. So I would use a string to represent the ID. So this is the ID of the first data I'm entering. And then for the value, I'm going to hit the plus button again and then enter the key, which will be the first name, and then the name of the player, which will be Frank. I'm going to hit the plus button again and enter the last name, which would be Lampard, and one more for the age, which is 44. I can also do country, England, and finally let's say the position, Position is a midfielder. Alright, so that's the first data, and if I hit on the add button, you see that we have our data right there, our players, and we have first data that's holding this. And if we want to add another data to the player, you can hit this plus button here, and then you can give your key or ID a name like second data, and for the value you can hit this plus button, and then you can enter the value. So first name, like before, we can say John, and hit the plus button again. Last name, he can say Terry, and for age we can say 56. Country, it's also England. And finally, position is defender. And if you hit add there, so you see that we have our players database. You have the first data, which is the key or the ID for these values here, that will be a JSON object, and you have the second data that holds the other value. So this is what it is really storing data on the real-time database. It's really easy to use and very nice. So one thing I like about this real-time database is that you can create it with a JSON object, and then you can import the data to your Firebase. If you head over here, you can see you have the export and the import link here for you to export the data. So let's say we are exporting this data. We get the JSON object right here. Let me just show it in Finder, and I'm going to open it. Let's open it with Visual Studio Code so you can see it. So if I open it, what we have here is that we have the player here, which is our database players, and then you have the key, which is holding the first object, and then all the values here, and you have another key holding the other values. So you can simply create your database in a JSON file and then import it to Firebase, and you get your data created, which is really nice and easy and amazing. I really wish they can do something like this in the Fire Store database. But yeah, that's it. This is how we'll be creating our database, guys. So what I would do is that I have the database created in a JSON file, just like this one. Let me quickly show you. I'm opening with Visual Studio Code. So this is the database right here that we'll be using. You have the players here, and then you have the ID. The ID is automatically generated for us if we're using Angular, and you have the different values here. So what we're gonna do is that we're going to import this data to our database. We have the key value pairs. I think I have two of them. I have one for players, and I have another one for position. So position, defense, forward, midfield. Let me add one more for the goalkeeper. So I put a comma there, and just paste that here, and change the name to keeper. And here I can remove this comma here, and I can say goalkeeper. So you can create your JSON object and import the data to Firebase, which is really cool and easy, and you can see how structured the data is, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to Firebase right here. I'm going to delete this players data because I don't need this. We want to import that new one I just showed you. So I'm going to hit this, import JSON, and I'll browse for the location, and it's in my downloads. just have to find this one. No, not this one. So this is the one we created, and this is the one that has all the data that we want. So I'm going to hit on open and then hit on import. Wow, data imported successfully. So as you can see, we have the database here. You have the different ID represent the data. How I generated this ID, it's from Angular. When you create a new record from Angular, Angular generates this ID for you automatically. So you don't have to worry about using a random string or anything. But you can also generate an ID randomly and use that if you want. But in the Angular application, it can be generated for you. So don't worry about that. And there you have the data and you have the one for the position. Alright guys, so this is the database that we would be using in this video. Before we start creating the Angular application, I would like to quickly set up the application to connect to Angular. So when you create your database, you go to project overview. You can connect your Firebase application to iOS, you can connect it to Android, and you can connect it to a web application. So in this video, we are connecting to a web application, Angular, to be specific, and we said it's Players app. And you can also do hosting here, and hosting it's for free, but you get Firebase default URL. And then we can register the app like so. And then it gives us these values right here. So these values would be what we would add to our Angular application to get access to this database. So it's set up for us. So the next thing we want to do is continue to console. And there we have it. You have our project overview, you have the Players app right here, and you have a real-time database. If I go to the project overview again, you see that we have the Players app here, and we can head over to the web app, and we can copy this configuration properties if we want to set it up to our Angular application. Alright, so that's it guys. Next we want to create our application, the Angular application, so I'll do that in the next video.